Hello, dear learners. Welcome to another session of learning. So today we'll be seeing about morphological processes and compounds. So what is morphological processes? Morphological process is a means of changing a stem to adjust its meaning to fit its syntactic and communicational context. So on certain occasions, just to fit into the context or to add to the syntactic meaning, a word changes its form. A root word usually changes its form by the addition of some part to it, either before the word or after the word. So let's see how it is done and how this morphological process happens. So there are different kinds of morphological processes. They are affixation, prefixation, suffixation, circumfixation, infixation, modification, and reduplication. So in the following slides, we'll be seeing an explanation and example for each of these kinds. So starting off with affixation. Affixation is where something is attached to the root or the stem of the word. Some examples are, for example, take the word job, rat, and kiss. When you add s or es to these words, we see that the meaning of the word changes from being singular, it becomes a plural morpheme. So this is called affixation. So job becomes jobs, rat becomes rats, and kiss becomes kisses. So this is affixation, where something is added to the root word and its meaning changes. The next kind we're seeing is prefixation. So prefixation is adding in front of the root or the stem word. So you add something, you add a bound morpheme is attached in front of the word. So this kind of affixation is called as prefixation. Example, you take the word selfish, you add un to it, it becomes unselfish. Moving on to the third category, which is suffixation. So like prefixation was before the word, yeah, suffixation is at the end of the stem, meaning at the back of the word. So take the example walk. The word, when you add ed to it, it becomes walked, and it denotes past tense. So the addition of a new suffix, changes the role of the word, and we see that walk becomes a past form with ed added to it as walked. So this was suffixation. Moving on to circumfixation. So circumfixation is where you add, both in front and the back of the word, meaning two separate parts. In front of the word also something is affixed, and back of the word also something is affixed. So examples are incorrectly. So in and ly are added to the word correct. Next is unacceptable. For the word accept, for the root word accept, we add the prefix un and the suffix able, so it becomes unacceptable. So this was about circumfixation. Now moving on to infixation. Infixation is where, in between the word a fixation is done. An affix is added. So an example is given over here in the word education. Edu, ma is added in between the word and it becomes edumacation. So this forms an entirely new word. So this is infixation. So far we saw affixation, prefixation, suffixation, circumfixation, and infixation. Now moving on to the next category, which is modification. So modification over here is a process where the alteration of the word happens. So we see that, the root word, it undergoes a thorough, abstract addition, and it changes its form. So this is modification. Moving on to the last, which is reduplication. So reduplication is where the root word is repeated or it's duplicated in part or as a whole. Examples are okie dokie, film, flam, pitter, patter, woo woo, boo boo. Most of the sounds made by children or babies are associated with reduplication. So I hope you understood the different types of morphological processes with their examples. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is compounds. So what are compounds? Compounds, we all know, is a combination of two words or two or three words. So we're going to see the process of compounding. So compounding is defined as the combining of two or more stems to form a new word that is stored as a single entry in the lexicon. So it becomes one single word. Two or more stems are joined together and they become one single word. Examples are blackbird, or 3-year-old. And we also see that the meaning of the compound is not affected by its spelling. And generally, we see that one of the word is called the head word and the other is called the modifier. So in the word buck saw, we see that saw is the head word and it is modified by buck. And sometimes, the spelling of the compound words may vary. So compound words, it can be spelt as a single word like sawmill, or it could be a hyphenated word like jigsaw, or sometimes it is spelt as two separate words like oil well or chain saw. So let's see, the different classification or how there's a difference between compounds and phrases. So the first is that compound words, always the stress pattern for compound word is the stress falls on the first word, and for phrase it falls on the second word. For example, take the word White House and White House. White House as a compound, the stress falls on the word white, whereas when it's a phrase, the stress falls on house. Next, we also see that the meaning of the compound may differ to a greater or lesser degree from that of its corresponding phrase. So the meaning also changes accordingly when it's a compound and when it's a phrase. And we also see that the order of the constituent of the words is also different. So, for example, for compound we will say sawmill, but when it comes as a phrase we say it's mill for sawing. And we also say that compound words allow no modification to the first element. So an example is a really black bird. Okay, and when it comes to a phrase, it becomes a really black bird. So for the compound, it's a hyphenated word, but when it comes as a phrase, it changes. And we also say that Bauer is given some English compounds based on parts of speech. So how can they be formed? So some examples and some formations are given here. So compound words can be noun. It could be both nouns or one verb, one noun, or it could be compound verbs where one is a noun and the other is a verb, one is an adjective and a verb. So the examples are given in the following slides. You can also see for the others. So compound adjectives, they could be compound adverbs, and neoclassical compounds also could be formed. So this is thoroughly based on the parts of speech, how compound words can be formed. And we also see that compounds in terms of the semantic relationship between the compound and its head is also based on that, there are different kinds. For example, the first is endocentric compounds. Endocentric compounds is when the compound represents a subtype of whatever the head represents. For example, you see the word traffic cop. We know that traffic, denotes that is a subtype of cop. So over there, it denotes the subtype of the compound word. So this is called an endocentric. Another type is exocentric. Exocentric is when the compound names a subtype, but the type is not represented by either the head or the modifier. Example is deadhead, redhead. We all know that it denotes people, but over here, directly there's no reference to a person. So this is exocentric compounds. And next is coordinative compounds. Coordinative compounds are in which both elements are head. For example, you can see, words like a teacher, researcher, producer, director. So both words have equal importance and both of them act as heads. So these were some of the types of compounds and how compounding is done. So in today's session, we saw the morphological process and we also saw compounds. I hope you were able to understand all of the concepts and you were also able to understand well through the given examples. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. Continue to learn and happy learning.